Welcome to the next episode of Athlete Things, and today we are super excited to have Anthony Krznar on the podcast, also known as the Australian Yeti, the biggest, friendliest man of Australian powerlifting. Thanks for coming on today, man.
Cheers for having me on, guys. I'm excited to be here. Always excited to get online and talk.
Yeah, sick. For those that don't know, so Anthony used to be one of the big dogs in PA, I guess you could say, one of the OGs back in Powerlifting Australia, the OG IPF affiliate, and then is now transitioned into GPC and is going down the pro rower route. So yeah, man, just give a couple of moments just to explain training history, powerlifting history, where you've kind of been and where you are now, just for the fans.
Yeah, so I started competing about 2015 in IPF. I lived in England. So I competed in the GBPF over there. I was tested, I was natural. I trained for about 10 months. So the first gym I walked in over there had a bunch of IPF boys. There's this guy named Ross there. He was 120 at the time. He benched about 220, deadlifted over 300. And I was like, oh, you can do this without drugs? Yeah, sign me up. Because, I'd only ever really heard of, back in the day, I was following a Brandon Lilly program and stuff like that, the Cube, back when I first started. So I trained in England for about 10 months, competed. I competed in sleeves, totaled 737 or 735 at that meet. Had a 300 pull, and then came back and I got approached by, I thought I was going to go PA because it was the biggest fed. I got approached by a coach from there and started competing pretty consistently then in the IPF and all the PA meets back then. Very quickly worked up to, I think it was my second or third comp, hit over 800 as a junior, and tapped out at about 862 in sleeves. Came down, and I was a super heavyweight back then. So for those that I guess don't know me, I used to, online I talk about a lot, I used to have a big issue with alcohol and drugs. So I used to drink a lot, and then, I'd live off KFC and scotch and beers. Then I had a big shift in my life and cut down to 120. I was actually a bit under. I was probably about 114, 115, and I competed there for a while. Totaled 852 as a 120 lifter. Did that for a long time. I competed at Worlds in 2016. I think it was my third comp in Killeen, Texas, and tore my quad in front of everyone. That's where the Australian Yeti name came from. Being a young lifter, being very excitable. Sorry, I'm a bit over the place. I'll start here. I was very excitable, right? And, when you're young, you just want to go and you feel like you don't have forever. I mean, I've been doing it 10 years now, but back then I just felt like I had to go all out all the time in my training, in my eating, in my lifting, in my competing. I always say if I had my time again, I would not do that comp because I just wasn't ready mentally. I was a nervous wreck. I lost 5 kilos. I didn't know how to travel and compete at all. I'd traveled into state once for a comp. Do you know what I mean? So I just wasn't ready. I went out there. I took second on the squat in the juniors at IPF Worlds. Andy Askell was miles ahead. He squatted 366 that day. It was the world record at the time for juniors. And I did a nasty 312 squat. It was under my PB. And then the coach at the time wasn't a very good coach, and we put 320 on. And if you put the weight on the bar, I'm going to try it back then. Right, I had no sense of self-preservation. There was no way I had a kilo in that squat on the day. And came out, my form was atrocious and tore my quad. I finished the meet with token other lifts because I'm not totaling here. But that had a big shift in my approach to training. After that, a lot of people don't know him. Janusz, JC, he is a coach. Well, he's not super popular online, but a very good coach and much more reserved and has a more long-term approach. And he was the first person that was like, hey, you should actually be planning not just 4 weeks ahead, but, 4 years ahead, 3 years ahead, 5 years ahead. If you keep going the way you're going, you're going to burn out by the time you're in your late 20s, mid 20s, and there won't be an Anthony competing. So I had some good people in my corner. And then that's when I started getting my life on track, and I cut. But unfortunately, I had abused my body for a very long time with drugs and alcohol by this point, even though I was sober at this point in my mid-20s. And I had very low testosterone. And I know now online, it's a big thing for people to say, I just do TRT, right? And they're really, I think that's the new fake natty kind of thing, right? You see it. I just do TRT and they're blasting grams of gear. But at the time, I was trying to get my mental health sorted. I was on, and I still am on SSRIs, so anxiety and antidepressant medication, and I'm on ADHD medication, but it just wasn't enough. And me and the doctors are like, well, what else is going on? I'm seeing a therapist, I'm doing this. So we ran multiple blood tests, and pretty consistently, even after a bunch of lifestyle changes, a lot more focused on health, and not in the short term, I mean, you know, over a good year, I had very low testosterone. My endocrine system was just shot. And whether that was genetic or from the abuse, it's probably from just the way I lived my life. You know, when I lived in England, I partied a lot, did a lot of drugs, I stayed up a lot, like, you know, didn't really sleep. So I always had said that I would switch to untested. I, you know, stopped progressing consistently for a fair while at this point. I'd been competing for 6 years. Because it was only just over 3 years ago I switched. And I went, well, look, I was always going to switch. I'm going to do TRT anyway. I can't do that in a tested fed. So what a lot of people don't know is while WADA have allowances for hormone replacement therapy for, you know, males, females, you know, trans athletes, for low testosterone in people like me, which is completely fair, you can't take it, right? Because even though you're still within the normal ranges, there's still a performance benefit there because you don't get those fluctuations, those peaks and valleys, right? So you guys, when you're natural, your hormones will come up a lot, they'll come down a lot. They're never really static, right? They never really just stay at 700, 600. Whereas when you're on TRT, pretty bang on, pretty high, right? So even when you're within natural ranges, there's still a performance benefit there. And then it opens up the whole door that there can be like a lot of abuse when you're not getting tested, and people are always going to run the gauntlet. Look what happens already in tested lifting or any tested sport. So I made the switch then. I retired from PA and through WADA or WASADA at the time. I retired. I like took myself out of the testing pool, waited until that was official, and then I switched, started TRT. And after a few months, lined up a comp and was like, all right, cool. I'm going to open up that door to more PEDs. So for most of the year, I do TRT or a lot of the year, but I obviously get a performance benefit and do more than that for competitions.
Yeah, that's interesting, man. I didn't know that obviously the original decision was probably more health-based rather than training-based, like you said, right? Like, did you just feel like the main decision was to obviously get your health and your mental health right?
That's why I did it then.
Yeah.
You know, again, you know, when you're on, I was on this really big, obviously I'm, you know, talk about my mental health and that a lot. And I was trying to get all that sorted, and, you know, as much as we were doing it, it was helping a bit, like all the SRIs and the therapy and that, but it still wasn't anywhere near where I wanted to be. And, you know, you hear a lot, low hormones affects depression, anxiety and that a lot. And I was like, well, let's try this avenue with the doctor and that as well.
How did it affect you moving forward?
With the mental health?
Yeah, like how did TRT affect your mental health afterwards? And obviously training would have had a benefit, but your lifestyle must have changed somewhat as well, right?
Yeah, like honestly, you look, it had an impact. Just like, I think people expect it. I think I see a lot online that, and this is why I consistently mention the lifestyle changes I made prior to this. I think a lot of time people be like, I have a bit of depression, I'm unmotivated, and I've got low hormones. The hormones are going to fix that. And it did help, but it was a small piece of the pie with everything else I was doing. Do you know what I mean? Fixing my sleep, fixing my nutrition, seeing a therapist, being on anti-anxiety and depression drugs already. And it did help. So every time we added in something new, it's like my baseline anxiety and depression got a bit better, right? And then adding in the TRT was kind of that. Not the last thing I did, because we've done a lot more like setting more schedules and that, and more lifestyle changes over the last few years with Mickey, my nutrition / well, that's probably the least important thing she does for me. She pretty much helps me keep my life on track. But yeah, every time we added something, it did help. So it did help, but I think people almost feel like it's going to be a magic bullet. And when people ask me that, it's definitely not a magic bullet. You know, I think a lot of people, and, you know, when they do start going down the TRT route and that, they in turn want to get the most out of it that they can. So they unknowingly change all their lifestyle factors, and that helps a lot as well. So it did help, but I would say after experiencing it and going through it and being March, just, you know, like just over 3 years, 3 years and a quarter into it. The other things had a much bigger impact, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, well, I remember when you first started making that cut down from super heavyweight, and I remember just like following it loosely on Instagram, and I was like actually really impressed how much, you know, from the outside it looked like you changed in terms of improving your health, because, you know, you were 140 kilos.
145.
Yeah. And then, you know, you made the trek down to 115 and was still getting up to that kind of mid 800 total. Like when I saw that, I was going, holy shit, like this guy's, you know, obviously making some pretty serious changes to his overall health, his nutrition, but then still able to do pretty close to what you were doing as a super heavy.
Really. I hit 10 kilos within my best super heavy total, and a lot of that was from bench. So my bench went from 212 as a super down to 196 as a one. So a huge drop. And I never got it over that. Like, even when I stabilized my weight, I just could not bench. When I was natural, I could not bench more than 196 at 120. And again, I stagnated for about a year. My squat only went down by about 10 kilos, but I got a lot on the deadlift, maybe even less on the squat, maybe, a bit less, 7.5 kilos, but still, like, the big drop was on the bench, but my dead went up. But I think a lot of that was cutting right, having someone doing my nutrition and that, not just, if you remember, it was about a year, 15 months I did it over. Because I didn't want it to be a crash diet. You see a lot of people try to go down a weight class, they've got a comp in mind, and they, drop 15 kilos, and then they, in the off season, they come back up. I know a few people like that, and it's just not sustainable. Whereas for me, it was very much, I just want to live a better life. I'd stopped drinking, stopped eating fast food, stopped doing drugs, and all of that had a massive impact. It's a lot easier to train when you're not hungover and not on a come down.
Well, your deadlift actually went up quite a bit. Hey, like low threes to like mid threes. Just with that less body weight.
Better positioning, honestly, it was just a lot of things were better, and trying to make all those changes really made me look at my training as well. And you should never just be, I guess, you could be happy with how you're training that, but you should always be looking at ways you can improve it. It's with lifestyle factors, right? So I'd gone through a fair few coaches. I'd always given them, a good year or so. And then I settled with Will Crozier a couple or 2 or 3 years ago. But there'd been a shift in from super low volume when I was with Robert Wilkes back in the day, before a lot of stuff with PA and that happened, to being super high volume and that Shigo-esque, and getting butchered on the other end. And then it was like, well, there's this middle ground that I've completely bypassed here. So I was, I think, there's a lot of factors into why I maintained a relatively good level of strength for the most part.
Yeah. And up to this point now, you guys, Dave?
I was going to say, I guess there's, you can train as hard as you can train, right, to an extent. But if you don't cover the other variables or tick the other boxes, check all the bases, then you're only going to get so far. But when you start to check all these other small things, that's when things can really start to explode. So, you can lose 30 kilos yourself, but you're starting to look at all these other lifestyle factors, and that's why things still, I guess, you didn't deteriorate in your total too much. Kind of just stayed kind of the same. I can imagine that your DOTS or Wilk score at the time skyrocketed.
Oh yeah, it exploded. It was way, way higher. Because I only lost 10 kilos on the total, but 30 kilos of body weight. So it made a huge difference.
Yeah, for sure. And you're only starting to see the benefits now, plus on top of the TRT everything's starting to come together for Pro Raw.
Yeah. Well, look, when I switched to untested, again, I don't shy away from the fact that, well, TRT was the reason I was always going to switch to untested lifting, at least for a while. I also always said I'll only do it for a finite amount of time, because as much as I love powerlifting, I don't want to die for powerlifting. And no matter how conservative you try to be, how much you monitor your health, there's always a price to pay for anything. So you can take PEDs and try to be as smart as possible. And I'm really big on this, that there's always that tax to pay, whether it's really bad and you have a heart attack, or you just have issues with, I don't know, you shut down your hormones forever, you have troubles with fertility, whatever it may be, you have, elevated kidney levels now, whatever it is, unless you truly are one of those people that try it one time, get scared, and which is fine, like you go, this isn't for me. Realistically, like, none of us that are doing this at a high level are coming out of this without some health issues, right? But when I switched, and that's me more like, it's one of those things where I'm open about it, but it's heat on the edge. I don't want to glorify it. Do you know what I mean? It's not something I think should ever be taken lightly. And it's not like, I coach way more natural people than I do people on drugs, on PEDs. And I think a lot of that is because a lot of people are more health conscious now, and people are realizing, when you start seeing bodybuilders dying in their 20s and 30s now, and even powerlifters dying younger, or having, even look at Pete Rubish, he retired, his kidneys are shot at 32. People are starting to realize that, well, maybe, staying drug-free isn't too bad. And they're starting to understand that not everyone in the IPF at a high level is on drugs either. In fact, the vast majority of people in tested lifting aren't cheating. So again, like, as much as I don't want to glorify it, when I switched, even with TRT, my bench shot up to like 215 within a couple months. Put on 20 kilos on my bench. Like, that year, I think I totaled mid 900. So put 100 kilos on my total pretty quickly. And now for Pro Raw, barring miss list, which always can happen, nothing's ever set in stone. We're looking pretty good for over 1,000 in sleeves. And that's within three and a bit years of switching.
And this has been at the same body weight?
Yeah. Probably about 4 kilos heavier now. So I compete at 125. So a stupid amount of, especially on the bench, like I said, my bench was 196, natty at 120. I just benched 240 pretty easy the other week, and it was like, you looked like a second. I'm pulling in straps. I pulled 405 pretty comfortably a few weeks ago, pulled 380 the other week without a hook grip. And my squat, I just squatted 380 last week, like, comfortably. So, it's one of those things where there was a huge, and I'm probably lucky in the way that I respond pretty well as well, because people don't realize that two people at the same strength level, untested. Look, Sam, you are freakishly strong. And if you switched, I'm not saying you're going to or anything, but if you did, you might get a huge explosion, total over 1,000 like I did, or you might teeter up to 900. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's always a risk people don't understand as well. You never know how there are those genetic, like, non-responders or people that don't respond well. But for me, I was very lucky. Like, it was like, even with the TRT, I was like, this is crazy. Like, I'm just like being my bench every week for like sub max singles or doubles. Obviously that's slowed down now, and like, it has slowed down. Like, I've probably been on the cusp of 1,000 plus for the last year. It's just about hitting it in comp. But yeah, like, there was a big improvement there on my total. And, like I said, I want to be done around 35. So I definitely took years off my career, because if I was tested, how many lifters do we know that are still competing at the world level naturally in their late 30s, early 40s, and doing very well, right? How many lifters do you know that aren't natural, that do that have been doing it for more than a handful of years? Not many. Yeah, whether it's injury, whether it's health, whether it's, well, they're usually the two things that get in, right? So it's one of those things where it does put a pretty hard cap on your career, especially as a heavy male.
Yeah. So
Well,
it
I'm
sounds
hearing, right.
it sounds a little, I guess, contradictory. You've got like 2 points when you first started early in your career. It was like you got to get healthy, and then now as you're drawing towards that like closer to 35 age, it's more about just seeing the limits of how hard you can push yourself until you call quits, right?
Well, like I'm turning 30 in April, but no, I definitely don't want to see how hard I can push it on the drug side. I don't
Yeah,
want
for
to.
sure.
I don't want to find out. But yeah, like right now it is a big balancing act of like, well, how much am I really willing to let my health slip for an extra 20 kilos of my total? And unfortunately, the more you do something, the more desensitized you become to it, and the further the goalpost shifts. So I was like, I'll be happy with 1,000 total. Now I'm like, 5 years, 1,050, barring a big injury, doesn't really seem unrealistic. So, but I've got that hard cap of where I'm going to pull out because I'm going to start trying for kids later this year. In the end, as much as I love powerlifting, I love my wife. I want to have an awesome family. I love my friends. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They are very real. I mean, you see a lot of people paying that price, right? And it's not something I'm willing to do, which is why I'm also definitely, when we talk about use and abuse, I really think outside of health, outside of any kind of health issues, whether it's TRT or, you see, women with hormone or trans people with hormone replacement therapy, outside of that very niche group, anything outside of that is really abuse, right? And is going to have some health issues. And anyone that, your blood work can check out, but I don't know many lifters that are getting their heart scanned consistently. Like I'm going for my first one this year to see if I've got or how much left ventricular hypertrophy I've got. Now, that's not purely down to the PEDs, but like a lot of you guys lifting for a long time will have some kind of hypertrophy, probably, but it's within a healthy level because your heart does need to get bigger, right? And you're putting strain on it. Obviously, PEDs increase that. So for me, it'll also be getting that scan and then having a baseline, getting it checked in a year or two. Is it getting larger? Well, we probably need to pull the pin earlier. And that's a lot of stuff a lot of lifters don't do because it's like a smoker, right? How many, there's ads everywhere for smoking, killing you. And, you kind of learn just to switch that off. Like you learn to ignore that fear. So, yeah, I guess that was kind of going into that. Yeah, like it is a balance.
To hear that you also pay so much attention to everything else, and it's not just I'm just going to blast this and see what I can do. It's no, I really need to prioritize myself, my family, my friends, because they all care so much about me. I can't just be solely focused on myself and just blast myself full of everything and essentially kill yourself, right? Rather, you're looking after them as well at the same time and thinking about them while you're doing it.
And you need to, though, right?
Like, great to hear.
Oh, cheers, I appreciate that. Like, and because it does need to happen more, right? Because again, in the end, like my wife is the most supportive human in the world, and she doesn't lift, but she, does my meal prep for me. She makes sure I'm in bed at 9 o'clock every night, so I get enough sleep. She literally so I've got really bad ADHD. My wife runs my life as in the nicest way possible, like in a supportive role. She has a full-time job, but then my goals are literally her goals. And it's a beautiful thing. I'm extremely lucky to have Denny. What a shit way to pay her back. Sorry, I don't know if I can swear. Sorry, I flipped out. But what a horrible way what a horrible way to pay someone like that back. Do you know what I mean? Hey, thank you for the last 15 years. I'm out like I'm going to have health issues for 5 years and I'm done. Like, do you know what I mean? And there's a lot more to life. And I think, again, talking before about when I was a junior and just go, eat, eat pizza for every meal, try to stack on. When I started, I was like 90 something kilos and I got up to 145 within 3 years. It was terrible. I felt terrible, but yeah, it was cooked. I looked horrible, felt horrible. But I just lost the train of thought. like, yeah, what a horrible thing to do. Like, as that junior mindset, right? You almost forget when you're young, and this is something that changed as I got older. You almost become hype. I'm 30 in April. That 10 years went pretty fast. Like, do you know what I mean? It's like when you're young, and this is again one of those things where you see a lot of people go, you need to lift for a certain amount of time, or don't take PEDs until you're this strong, or it's a waste. And for the most part, that's not true. You need to lift long enough to know how to train, know how to eat, know how to recover, know how to not mess yourself up. But I think the most important thing is you need to get to a point where you're mature enough to realize that you're not going to live forever. There are repercussions. And for a lot of people, that doesn't happen until their mid-20s, right? That sense of fear and like, just, I could really hurt myself. I mean, it's like, when you're a teenager, I don't know about you guys, but, I'd stand on cars drunk while they were driving, like, like just a completely different human. I remember, four-wheel driving in the back of a ute drunk, like, and me and two of my mates falling out. I thought one of them died. They were okay. But, you don't, when I was young, I didn't have any sense of fear. So if I had done this at 21, like, it would have been a very different approach to now.
Yeah.
Definitely I guess it gets harder knowing the risks because you're no longer training with ignorance as well. Like, once you understand the risks, it then becomes a conscious decision to keep going.
Yeah. And, and I feel like when you're doing it, you should be scared. You should have that fear, right? It shouldn't be flippant. And I don't mean like if you're doing it and you're having panic attacks, it's not worth it. I just mean you should be hyper aware though that, there's repercussions for everything. And again, it'd be the same if someone was drinking 12 beers every day. Like, you should know what that's doing to your body, potentially, which, work goes into, I know you guys had mentioned, or Sam had mentioned, like wanting to talk about just some of the health metrics and that we track. Again, because so many people, and I've touched on it a little bit, but you see, just especially the younger guys, they don't do that. A lot of them, like I know some of them that do, and there's almost been two big branches in untested lifting now. A lot of the guys overseas and some Aussie guys now, again, are just take as much as you can, get as strong as you can, and I don't care if I only last 5 years in the sport. I'm going to go out in a ball of fire. And then you've got these other people being like, look, we got a lot of people dying very young that should not be. And, you always see people defend it. Oh, they had a genetic heart condition, or they did this stupid. I'd never do that. Like, people always try to defend it. But there has been a new branch of people that are all about harm reduction. Again, though, you've got to get to that point where you're not saying it's safe, but there's a lot of coaches now that are very big on blood work, monitoring your blood pressure every single day. Blood pressure will, especially jacking it up with PEDs, and that will kill you very, very young, lead to, kidney issues, heart issues, monitoring sleep and things like sleep apnea and that. Like, a lot of untested people, the size of your neck gets bigger, and that obviously you're a lot heavier than you naturally walk around at. Like, I have sleep apnea, and I did a lot of that on my story going through getting my CPAP last year, like towards the end of last year, and I feel way better now. So, there is a big branch of people that are now about harm, like, reduction, and, for the most part, less is more. If you go crazy for 4 years, or you take a more moderate approach for 10 years, you tell me which one's going to end up stronger. The guy or girl lifting for 10 years, right? Because it's just like tested lifting, like in IPF and that, the people that are strongest are usually the ones that do it the longest, to an extent.
Yeah. I'm big on that. Like, this sport rewards the people that hang around the longest, right?
Yeah.
And if you're the longer you're here for, the stronger you're going to be.
100%.
Big Anthony, currently in prep for the Pro Raw next weekend. On your Instagram, just checking it out, you had that quad strain like a few weeks ago. Tell us a bit more in terms of how you're managing that, in terms of the setbacks in a competition prep, how you bounce back, or how you have the mental confidence to bounce back after a significant injury like that, and how you're heading into next weekend?
Yeah. So last year in the prep for Breakthrough, I tore my meniscus, and what happened was I was squatting 410 in wraps. I hate wraps. I'm never doing wraps again. Like, I'm all eyes on sleeves now, and I only did wraps because that's what all the Aussie untested lifters are. But I'm like, well, I'm competing against all the international guys on open powerlifting, and I'll go over America. So I just sprained my adductor, and then obviously my left adductor, my right knee kicked in to like catch the weight, and that's when I tore my meniscus. So I rehabbed that, but it took about 12, 13 weeks. So I didn't really do any squatting or any hard leg training. I should have done more leg training, but I was like, I got a bit lazy with it. I did a lot of upper body. And then I came back, and that was fine. I got the all clear from my physio, Dan Gadesi, amazing physio here, works at out of Melbourne Strength Culture. And within 5 weeks of coming back to squat, I wasn't pushing any PDs or anything, but like, you know, they were feeling good. So within 5 weeks, I hit 335 for a triple. And the RPE was about a 7, like, you know, not super easy, but not stupid. And then on my back offs at 295, my last set, I just lost a bit of focus, which is neither here nor there. Like, and I tore my VMO bad. I went down. I just sunk it a bit too deep. Now, you should not be so fragile that if you squat 2 inches too deep, you tear something. So that was on me. Again, being lazy, a lot of my movement, just not training any kind of deep flexion or anything. And it just went, it was the grossest feeling. I've had a few tears. This is the worst. It just went pop, 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 pop. And every pop, I could feel it like open up a bit. Like my VMO, it was bad. And Geordie was back spotting me. Usually I don't get a spotter on something under 300. And he, like, I'm very impressed. He grabbed the weight and let me battle under it, but I couldn't put any pressure on the leg. And we knew straight away that was bad. We're like, this is not good. So got a MRI, saw Dan very quickly. And it was a grade true tear, but it was 6 centimeters long, 2 centimeters wide, and like over 2 centimeters deep. Something like that. That's what it said on the scan anyway. And it went all the way out to the side of the muscle, but it wasn't full thickness, luckily, because that would be a very different story, right? And I called my coach, because obviously any injuries are very upsetting, and I'd just come off the meniscus tear, and I was like, is this the end? Is this it? Am I just going to get injured all the time now? Am I old? And he was like, no. He's like, we just got excited. You just put the weights up too fast. And like Dan said, that tissue resilience wasn't there, right? Obviously just too fast on the progression, even though it was moving easy. So that it was a bad tear. And, but, you know, injuries happen. And the longer you do this and the stronger you get, the more likely they are to occur at some point, right? It's just, you live for 10 years, like something's probably going to happen if you're pushing the envelope. Now, unfortunately, this one could have been avoided with a slightly more conservative approach to my training in that prep. And that's a big issue I've always had, is I like training really hard, right? Which is great until you can't switch it off and, you know, you just go all the time. So working with Dan, it wasn't a good tear, but I told Dan straight away, and, you know, quite an aggressive approach in the way that we're going to just work through the pain, but still safely. So that day, he had me going through as much range as I could, right? And the next day, just sitting there on the couch, getting my leg through as much of the range as I can. And 4 days later, I was doing that, applying a little bit of pressure, you know, resting my leg on the bed of the couch and pushing down through the top of my foot. So obviously I had my leg bent behind me. I was just pushing into it, trying to get a little bit of just anything through the quad. Anyway, 4 days later, I went and saw him, and he did a lot of testing, and we ended up squatting like 180, 190 to a box for a set of 4. It was very painful, but like, he's like, all right, look, we can be pretty aggressive with this. It's a bad tear, but you know, you're recovering fast. And obviously being untested, we have the whole side of, now, anabolic steroids do not help with injuries like that. They actually increase your risk of injury. Most of them reduce collagen synthesis in that, right? So a lot of people don't realize that. They go, oh, you're going to just blast a bunch of gear. Like, no, that's the worst thing, because that's a bunch of stress on the body as well. But we have things like peptides, right? Which are very good for injuries. So very lucky that people ask how I recovered so fast. Good physio, a lot of stubbornness and determination, and peptides enhancement, PEDs, right? There's a whole big school of them. But I saw my physio a lot, and within 5 weeks, I squatted 300 again with 320. And my physio was just like, this is just stupid. Like, this is ridiculous. But by all metrics and all his clinical testing, I was safe to do so. And again, it was a bad tear. So the biggest challenge after that is mental, right? Yeah. That expectation that it's going to happen again. When I don't have any of you boys ever had like a bad tear?
Not me, but
Steve has.
What have you done?
I've had it all. I've broke my arm, torn hamstring. I've had my adductor go.
Did you break your arm benching?
Just about everything. Yep.
Oh, it was like 140 something, yeah?
Yeah.
I remember, yeah. Oh, man. No, that's way worse. So, yeah, you understand, right? So, the biggest, after you've got the clearance and that, the biggest issue, the hardest thing at the start is trusting your body again. Right? I don't know about you, but you go to lift and you almost anticipate that feeling again.
Yeah.
So you go to lift and you're like, oh, like as you get lower, you're like, oh, it's gonna tear because it's a little bit tight, or there's a little bit of like just not pain, but you can feel like there's scar tissue and it just feels tight. So, I very much have the mindset that obviously I could have avoided that injury. It was pretty much my fault. But after that fact, I'm working with amazing people. I've got an amazing coach. We started doing a lot of stuff I've never done. So really heavy, like isometric holds. So on a leg press, so Dan was trying to find ways that we can put heaps of stress through my quads and like my VMO and that in really deep flexion without fatiguing my whole body, right? So not in a squat pattern. So lots of weird stuff I've never done. And we added in a bunch of like plyos and stuff, right? So you see I do a lot of jumps and that now for warm-ups, not a lot, but a few. And it was just finding ways that, well, what's the lowest hanging fruit here? Where am I weakest? What am I bad at? And how is that actually going to carry over to my lift? So you notice whenever I did jumps or I know I lifted heavy, I can put the brakes on really well. I can reverse my squat really well, but there's always like a stutter afterwards. And it takes me a while to be able to generate any force on most of my lifts. I'm like, it's like a tractor versus like a race car, right? And he was like, well, what if we can just make that more efficient, make you more explosive and that, not banded 6x3, West Side, more like just doing jumps and that in my warm-ups and trying to be explosive. And all that's helped a lot. Listening to my physio, trusting him, trusting Will Crozier, my coach, and then trusting myself. So the approach very much is, look, after I started squatting about 320 again, I was like, I'm fine. Like, it's going to be fine now. And consciously, I wasn't scared because, you just tell yourself, if you're doing everything you can, if you honestly can look at it and go, I'm doing all my rehab, I'm resting, I'm not doing anything stupid, I'm sticking to the plan that 2 very qualified people have made, I'm not making changes, and I'm doing everything right, I'm getting my 8.5 hours of sleep a night, I'm hydrated, all those little things. If I'm doing all of that, then if it happens, it's going to happen. Do you know what I mean? If I've controlled every variable that I possibly can outside and inside of the gym, there's no point being scared because some things you just can't help, right? Yeah. So as long as I'm doing everything right, I'm not going to be scared because, shit happens. And I've very much had to, reinforce that this whole prep. But it's helped a lot because, the first time I did 370 again, this prep, it moved like garbage and I squatted a high because I was nervous. And then 2 weeks later, I hit 380, and that was last week, pretty comfortably. because a lot of those nerves are gone now, and you end up trusting your body again. But I wasn't upset about it. It was just all right, look, let's just get work done. And it really actually, you're always trying to, for me, I'm always fighting complacency, right? Because I've always, some people are built for certain things. I've always been able to add weight to the bar pretty easily without focusing on nutrition, sleep. Like I said, I used to go out and party, come in and I'd PB my squat when I was younger. So for me, sometimes there's those little, I would prefer it to have been a gentler reminder with the quad. But, when I start getting complacent, it's always about just trying to bring that back. And this was good for that to be being like, well, I need to start controlling all those little things again. I'd let my sleep slip. I was staying up playing PS5 and stuff like that. So it's a good reminder. As far as the prep's gone, outside of the quad tear, and I've bounced back pretty well from that, it's gone well. We had my deadlift has always been lacking because of my grip. I've never done a hard deadlifting comp. It's always flown to the top and then dropped out of my hands. So we've put a huge emphasis on grip work this whole training last 12 weeks, and it's paying off. And after, I still think obviously it's going to be lagging. I want to just pull enough to total what I want to total, and then keep chipping away at my grip. So even with hook grip, my grip still lacks. And bench, has progressed really well. So the progress has been there. I think the biggest battle has just been trusting my body and not being scared of pushing it. And I got rid of those jitters pretty early. So I think, my biggest total in sleeves was last year, 975. I dropped 387 dead at lockout for 997, which would have been the win again, because I compete against all the rap guys at Pro Raw. I don't do the sleeve day. Again, because that's the level I need to be lifting at if I'm going to America and that anyway. And so we're on track for, again, I don't call specific numbers, but we're looking good for 1K plus, but there's always a caveat, right? Last year I missed my opener on squat. I rocked back on my heels and I got stapled in the bottom. And then, and then obviously Will, my coach, was freaking out. He says he wasn't, but there's video of him biting his nails and like, what are you going to do? Are you all right? And I was like, yeah, I'll just squat it next, man. I just stand up. So anything can happen on the day. You can't really plan for that. It's part of, unfortunately, in the gym, you can retake away. At comp, you got 3 shots. But I think, 1K plus will be good. We've got Mitch Lee, who's going to go looking like he'll go pretty far over 1,000 in reps, which will be good. I'm always like competition. I lift much better when there's other strong people around. But yeah, go for 1K plus. And then I really just want to try to set up. My big goal is within the next year or two, I want to try to shoot for the all-time world record squat, which is currently 410.
Yeah. Is that in wraps too? Is that wraps? But you'll do it sleeves? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
No, that's the sleeve. The all-time wrap is like 485.
Yeah.
From Zahir years ago. You remember Zahir? You guys too young for that? No, you remember Zahir, right?
I remember Googling strongest powerlifters.
Yeah.
Squat.
So he totaled 1,112.5 or 125.
Wow.
And Eric Lillibridge couldn't out total him. So I'm like, I'm probably never gonna be able to do that in wraps. Like he's a freak. A different generation of lifters than in the wraps and that as well. But that's my plan for that. After that, there's a comp in October I'll do. So we'll take a nice big off season, focus on some health. I always like to get my body weight back down after comps. So at the moment I'm 127, and after comp I'll probably try to drop to about 120, 122.
Yeah. And you mentioned American meets. Is that like a goal kind of for more competition, or more just to kind of get some more experience, have some traveling?
I'm very aware that I'm coming to the end of my career, not in the strength wise, but because I've got that set 35.
Yeah.
So it's more, I want to do American meets now because I'm like, let's say I compete 2 or 3 times a year at the most for the next 5 years. I got like 10 or 15 meets left, right? And I want to have fun with it. I want to go, bust shoulders with the best lifters that are currently competing. I don't want to be as much as I love all my Aussie lifters and that, like how nice would it be to get beaten by John Hack on dots? Like, do you know what I mean though? Like, we're like, man, like that was a good memory. Or, like I talk to Shane Hunt a lot. He's talking about coming here and going up there, but how good it would be just to hang out with these people I've looked up to for years, and now I'm lifting on their level. Like, it's a very nice position to be in, but I also know it's like, Shane Hunt's only 26. Like, he's going to be in it longer than me. So, like, I want to just get those memories, have some fun, represent Australian powerlifting. We've got some amazing tested lifters, and we have over a long time. We've had a few really good untested lifters, but, we don't have as many as the other countries because we're not as big. So, it's always nice to see an Aussie doing really well at those big international meets. We just had 2 lifters at the Ghost Clash.
Lily.
Lily Riley and Alana.
Yeah.
She was 67 kilos, right? And again, I had a lot of American lifters message me like, where are these girls coming from? Like, so that's always good. And then, just travel on that as well, like it's almost a reward. And I'm at the point now, I'm the first time in my career where I'm not losing money competing, not making money, like, like you don't make money, but like I've got a sponsor that he's amazing. He only does Melbourne. It's Explosive Custom Macros, but he does all my food for me and all my meal prep out. Like my missus still cooks me some food because I like variation, but 3 meals a day, 240 grams of protein a day in those meals alone. So like, it's like, well, I can put that money to traveling and stuff. And, there's money meets now, but the next comp I do will be in October in Australia because there's a big money meet in New South Wales.
Is that breakthrough?
Nah, that's not on this year. There's another one. They've announced it, so I'm pretty sure we can talk about it. I forget the name of it. It's in Orange. It's Bathurst. And so far, it's 25K for first place male, female on Wilks or dots, 12.5 for second, and like 5 or 7.5 for third.
Damn.
And that's going up. They've just got someone telling they're giving him more money. Now, there's a big American lifter that's supposedly coming down for it, so I'll be happy with second if I can get it.
Yeah.
But again, that'll fund trips next year to America.
Yeah. It's definitely cool to see more money, like the more money meets, more prize money starting to, come about in competitions, like especially with the untested side, but even more so now with the tested side, with like Sheffield obviously being the biggest one.
Right. That's going to be the biggest money meet ever, right? 200 and something thousand pounds.
Yeah. Well, I think
that is insane.
Yeah. Yeah. The most someone can win is 50 or 60,000.
50K. 50K.
Pounds.
Oh, so only
And
100,000 Aussie.
Yeah.
But that's if they get like squat, bench, deadlift record, and the total record, I believe.
You guys are APU, right? IPF.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. This sport doesn't need more division. I know this is something we can talking about, but just quickly, I can't get around the federation hate, right?
Yeah.
So, and again, I'm not calling out any individuals in that, but compete in the fed you want to compete in, and whatever fed you're in, follow their rules. I know people don't like that they can't compete in other feds, but that's the way it's been for a long time. People act like it's a surprise, and it's not. And I feel like a lot of people almost forget that that's what PA was like. And I know some people got burnt by all that stuff back in the day, and maybe they get scared of it, but the IPF is necessary. The IPF isn't doing anything wrong. USAPL have their own things there. They're doing money meets that now, but like, man, like, just the fact that Sheffield, like 200 something thousand pounds, like this is awesome for the sport. What we don't need is people trying to literally, and you see a lot of it, people try to tear down federations simply because it's not the one they lift in. It's really weird. Like I don't get it at all. Because I've got lifters in APU, USAPL, GPC, like, you know what I mean? I've got lifters everywhere. Yeah. And I can't coach in APU, and we don't have an issue with that. It's the rules. Like, it's sports integrity rule, but also it's just the way it's always been. Do you know what I mean? Like, it sucks as a coach, but also it's not a surprise. Like, it's not anything. So, I'm very excited to watch Sheffield. I love watching IPF Worlds every year.
Yeah.
And to support these big money meets, though, people need to not get upset if they have to pay $20 to watch these streams.
Yeah, fucking. I was saying that the other day. Like, I would like happily pay a small token figure to watch Sheffield or to watch, a stream online if it's like good quality for sure. Because at the end of the day, that's putting money back into
Exactly
the sport, which will then help, run better comps, get better gear, whatever it is.
We're in a period of powerlifting where for the first time, there's actually pretty good money. Now, it's only going to a few lifters, but this is how it starts. And that's how it is. Like, the best are going to win the money. That's not a bad thing. Like, not everyone should be walking out with money. Like, I'm not saying that, but there's some good money in the sense that, I don't think anyone's living off of it unless you're happy to live like, one of those Sheffield lifters, if they can live off 100K, like, again, that'll get you through a year, right? But, this is a good amount of money. But we're in this period now where it needs to make sense for the people putting up the money. So people, again, and the streams, they don't need to be UFC level pay-per-view streams because they're not charging $90. But, a token $20 for a pretty good stream, like, because we all want betting streams. If running a half decent stream isn't that hard, like APU's doing it now. I saw their stream down here at Into when they first had it. Yeah. And I'm going to go and spectate one of the MC one of the comps as well. But I saw that, and with the cuts, and it looked so good. I was raving about it because there's been a lot of work going into it. And again, though, it's all on OBS, which is free software. They've probably paid someone to make it as nice as it is. But again, for those bigger meets, getting asked to pay $20 is the only way it's going to be sustainable long term, because sponsors will put up money in that. But I'm telling you, a sponsor puts up, SBD is putting up the money for Sheffield. Like,
it's difficult to imagine them doing it every year.
Yeah, and people are already buying SBD stuff, and the brands that are in powerlifting are pretty cemented. It's not like they're going to see a massive influx of sales after a meet like that. You know what I mean? Because they've got their name on the background. It requires people now to be put in $20. Whatever it is, but just like it's so important. I think that if you're in the position to, like, we got to try to support this, because I feel like it's going to go one or two ways, right? Obviously, but over the next few years, if it just doesn't make sense and they're just hemorrhaging money, that goes away, and we miss that opportunity again for the next generation of lifters. How cool? Sam, how old are you?
27.
27, and what are you totaling? 850? 830?
850 in the gym, 830 at Open Nats last year. Yeah.
Right. How cool to be, and you're going to be lifting for a long time yet. You're still progressing. Yeah. Well, you we talk about you at Apex all the time. Like, we'll have the biggest crush on you. Like, you're very impressive with stuff. Like,
you made it, Sam. You made it, Sam.
But
it's getting hot.
Oh, like, again, a 120 tested class is a hard class to look athletic in, and you do that, and you're a nice tall boy, but also you're just very strong and very consistent. I remember you as a junior, and I think I remember you squatting 260. Yeah,
260.
Yeah, and I remember being like, oh, like, he's gonna be strong, like, and you've just been so consistent. But how good would it be if you're not losing money competing internationally in the future? You're making even enough just to cover your flights and come back with a few grand. Like, I would love nothing more than to see that for all the lifters here, right? For you, for like both of you, for anyone. Just like, there's this really good opportunity here, and I just don't want us to squander it. I'm really worried about that.
Sure. Like, it's crazy. Like speaking for yourself and I, Sam, like, getting the flights for Malta is already it's already pretty hefty.
Right? It's amazing. Is that the first time it's happening for you?
Yeah, so this will be my first Worlds, and Danny's going on the coaching team. And like, yesterday we were just kind of doing the rough budget, adding up in terms of spending money, the fee to APU, flights, accommodation. It's like, fuck, it's actually going to be pretty expensive.
It's expensive, and that's why you see a lot of people. That's why you always see so many masters and that as well at these international comps, because they have the money to do it, right? And that's not a bad thing, but like how many good lifters miss out because they don't have the money
Yeah, like the barrier of entry is just so high.
for those big
It's
international
difficult.
meets. Is the Fed paying for your flights?
Don't think so, no. So
No.
Or
all out of pocket.
I thought you were saying you got someone's paying for your flights.
Not at all. So
I misconstrued. That's my fault. Yeah, because again, all right, you're looking at how long are you going for? 2 weeks?
Well, Danny's going for 2 weeks. I'm tacking on a bit of a holiday after, for an extra 12, 14 days after. So yeah, I'll be away for like about 4 weeks, but Danny will be away for just the 2 weeks, I think.
So Danny, you're probably looking at 5-6K altogether, right? Just to get
already
there and to stay without food or anything.
Yeah, pretty much.
You know,
it's wild. Like imagine getting that paid for.
Exactly. You know, or even just your flights, like and the accommodation. You don't need to stress about food and that. Then you know what I mean? Like it's a big setback for a lot of people. Not a lot of people have $6,000 just to spend on something that they can never get money back for. So I'm all in for, you know, we want to run some meets in the future with even putting up, you know, some money, like even like $5,000, it makes a huge difference, you know?
Yeah.
So like meets that aren't huge.
Yeah, we're doing that in 3 weeks. We've got Perth Cup, which will be like an APU state qualifier.
Mm-hmm.
And we're putting up prize money. I believe it's male, female. First place is 1,000, second place is 500, third place is 250. But yeah, obviously the goal is to start getting money into the sport, and then from there you can just obviously grow it more and more.
But there you go. That pays for a lifter's entry. Even the second place pays for their entry for the year, most of their competitions. So they haven't actually lost money on competing nationally that year or in the state.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's just and it's a good incentive. Like it's just a nice reward. Like, because it doesn't happen for most people. And again, especially Aussie lifters, how many of us have big followings online? Like not a lot where they can make money like that.
Yeah.
And just before you guys are done, because I know I talk a lot, did you guys, I don't know his name. I feel terrible. He's a USAPL lifter.
Oh, no.
No. It was a USAPL lifter that just went 1,002 at 118 or 1,007 on the weekend.
Over in America.
I think it was in Singapore or Korea.
Keenan Lee. Yeah,
Keenan Lee.
What's his Insta handle? Like deadlift god or something?
I think it was like a random Korean dude.
Yeah. Oh, well, so over 1,000 kilos in sleeves. This next generation of lifters is just cooked.
Yeah.
You know, 5-8 years ago, with my total now, I would have dominated in the rankings.
Yeah.
Right. And now I'm like, I'm one of the top at 125 in the world, hopefully after this comp. But now there's 90 people lifting the same in sleeves. Like
and juniors doing it too.
Oh man,
it's crazy.
It's so impressive. Hey, like the sports comes, so I love it. Like it's so good. And it's not a bad thing. I love it. Like it's amazing to watch, but I can't wait to be 40 and be like, yeah, you know, I totaled 1,030, and people are like, dude, like there's 90 kilo guys doing that now.
It makes me want to keep going, because all of a sudden there'll be some sub-junior 120 come out of high school and be benching 220. I'm like, fuck that.
Do you feel like
you can't let them do that to you? Can't let them do that to you.
Can't, bro. You can't. Like I would say this because I would love to coach a lifter that was stronger than me. Because there's a guy that he's a mate. I went to high school with him, right? His name's Frank. And he was a bodybuilder. He's an untested lifter now, but he did one comp last year. Never done powerlifting, didn't know anything about it. Came into my gym, was like, can you just make sure I'm doing this right? Like, had to learn what squat depth was, and he totaled 820. He did like 3 weeks. He just did like 3 singles and totaled 820. And I was like, hey man, you should do this sport. like this. He's only 26 as well. And
that's crazy.
yeah, I know. Like it's just insane. But do you find that you find it easier, like that progression keeps coming because people keep setting the bar further, so it changes your perspective? You're like, oh no, I could probably do that then.
It's hard to say, right? Like it's a combination of like talent pool getting bigger. Like the more people find out about powerlifting, you're going to get someone eventually that just is genetically gifted enough to like keep overloading, right? But at the same time, I think that's also a factor where, you know, your expectations are getting higher, like that 4-minute mile story, right?
Yes,
If you see someone in your weight class doing it and they make it look easy, it opens up the possibility for you to do it, so you can potentially push harder.
Yeah, and I think the talent pool can't be understated. Obviously, the sport's exploded. It's just such rapid growth, but also like, look at how many people were deadlifting 400, 6 years ago versus now. Look at how many. I mean, just look at the 83 kilo IPF class. Like Nathan Tannis had the world record for a bit there, the squat, or was it unofficial though? And
now
like
they're all 300.
And now, it's
plus,
like necessary to squat over 300 in that class. And again, talent pool, but like, it's just also, I don't know, when the barrier shifts, right? Like when you're not scared, or you don't limit yourself, you can also perform better. So it's one of those things, right? Like I never thought I'd bench 250, and now I'm like, well, I could probably do 250. And obviously there's different variables there as well, but I don't know. It's just exciting. I'm just very excited to watch this forever.
I had that moment when I first went 800. I was like, oh, fuck, 850 isn't that far away.
Right.
And, I did 850 in the gym, and now I'm like, all right, Cam's 888.
Oh, dude,
best ever total.
Still one of the most impressive totals I've ever seen.
As a junior.
Right.
As junior, I think,
Yes. Yeah. His last junior comp in New Zealand.
Yeah.
That it shook me. Like it's just insane. Cam, unfortunately, he's had a lot of injuries since then. And he started lifting quite young though. You see that.
Yeah.
As in, if you look at his lifting age, he's only my age, he's 30. But if you look at his lifting age, it's a lot longer than everyone else, like at our age. But that 888, man, last junior comp, huge PB, that was insane to watch, but that'll stand for a long time in Australia. I mean, you'll be the one to break it. Yeah. Because it's still the 120 total work. I don't know what it is in APU, but the biggest tested 120 total in Oz.
Yeah. It's I took it with last year's Open Nationals at 830.5. So 120 tested is still 888, I believe.
It's so much total.
so much
total.
It is so much. But he's a strong dude.
He is. All right, my man. We better cut it out there. Thanks so much for coming on. Obviously, fucking all the best at Pro Raw in 2 Saturdays time. Sunday.
Next week Saturday, right?
I'm on the Sunday. Yeah. The wrap day. So cheers. Yeah, just under 2 weeks. Yeah,
awesome. How can people find you on the gram?
Just look up the Australian Yeti. So it's the _Australian _Yeti, but if you write the Australian Yeti, it comes up.
Yes.
Or Anthony Krznar, and my gym is Apex Strength.
Oh, good. All right, man. Thanks again for coming on, and all the best. Looking forward to see you.
Thanks, Anthony.
Cheers for having me, legends.